Hi, so I'm Ophélie Surcouf. I'm a French writer and journalist. I cover Korean culture in general, and I wrote 3 books about Korean culture. So I analyzed the phenomenon from fans in general, so all over the world, not just France. I also wrote about the Squid Game phenomenon because it was quite the thing this year, well, last year. And I just publishing actually today a book about Korean culture, but like really all the aspect of it. So it's kind of like an introduction to K-food, K-beauty, K-fashion, K-animation, basically all the Ks, the webtoon, video games, all of that. So yeah, that's, that's where I stand.
Hi everyone, my name is Lucky. That's my nickname. My Indian name is Abhishek. I'm from New Delhi, India. I came to Korea in 1996. This is my 27th year. And besides being part of Korean television, I also run a restaurant and I also have a trading company here. And it's a very funny way. I try to tell, if you don't remember who I am, you can Google the most famous Indian in Korea and it still works.
So I'll do it next. My name is Carlos GORITO. I'm from Brazil. I've been in Korea for 14 years. I currently work at the Embassy of Brazil here in Seoul, working with culture and education. I also do TV from time to time, not as often as Lucky, but sometimes I do it. I was at the Bijan Sonredam Abnormal Summit. And I'm someone that really likes to watch the trends about Korea in Brazil and in Latin America. With my wife, we run a YouTube channel with 1,200,000 subscribers. It's a big channel in Brazil. And I've been following how people react differently and the different audiences that we've been talking to. We've been doing that for almost 6 years now. And there has been many changes during that time. So yeah, looking forward for the questions and discussion.
Yeah, I saw you on the TV. EBS. 안녕하세요. Good afternoon. I am Sangmin SHIM, the professor in the Department of Media Communication. I used to working for Samsung Economic Research Institute before, and also I served for Korean Film Council as a vice president. And actually, my interest field is business and economics of culture industry and entertainment industry too. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And I am Sam Richards, a sociologist from Penn State. So, hey, I'm curious, and let's start by keeping this just very general. So for me, as I was listening to the 4 speakers, lots of things just came up that I wanted to comment on or think about or ask them, and I wanted to be in a one-on-one conversation with each one. So I'm wondering about the 4 of you. What jumped out? What kind of thoughts did you have, questions did you have that were immediate?
I think what stood out for me was the first conference because I think it touched a topic that I find really interesting, which is the change in the way that we talk about why we like Korean culture. So there was this whole, because their future project is about this project that's going to analyze if, for example, so there's this old way of talking about why we like Korean culture, which is the Han, which is what we find in Korean culture that all Koreans share all around the world and something that as a viewer you could identify with, which is what was used in the beginning of research around Korean culture. But then more and more there's this idea of finding exoticism, is that the English word? Yeah, exoticism in it. And more there's a consensus or an idea that it's the mix of both that makes it both familiar and different to anyone who watches it. And so I found that this was really like a very interesting topic to explore and also very current and yeah, something that's going to probably come up a lot because you can't explain easily why France and Chile and Argentina and India and South Africa are getting interested in Korean culture. I travel a lot, and for example, in South Africa, you could hear BTS twice and all of the artists on radio. And you just look at the country and you look at Korea and you're like, what's the similarity? There's really nothing much that comes out. So it's really something I think that's going to come out. Yeah.
Yeah, I found it really interesting to see how people in different countries, they interpret the culture, Korean contents in general in a different way, in their own way, and how that leads them to act. I mean, not only like a consumer, like consuming more Korean products or services, or looking at Korean companies more favorably, but also in their own setting, I would say mostly politically, which is a topic that I'm really interested in. We've seen K-pop fans organizing themselves and acting politically as a group in different countries. We've seen that in Chile, and now in Brazil, we're having elections now. We had the first round at the beginning of the month, and we're having a second round at the end of the month. And K-pop has been a tool of gathering people, maybe in a way that in the past, a role that was played by like labor unions or maybe political parties, since they can't really communicate with the youth, I think K-pop fandoms has been playing that role. And it's really interesting. That was mentioned in the first presentation, also in the second presentation very briefly about Philippines. And that's something I've been seeing in Brazil and feeling from people, and that which is interesting because I don't see that very often in Korea. And being in Korea, it's very interesting to see how foreigners interpret it. They understand Korean culture in their own way according to their reality.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, that's really quite interesting.
Okay, yes. Out of presentations this afternoon, I got very strong impression about the terminology, new terminology, sweet power. Sweet power. Maybe the first French presenter explained that. You know this meaning of soft power. So to me, the transformation from soft power to new things, sweet power, would be very important to current strategies. Because, you know, the Professor Joseph Nye, provided the new concept of soft power. It's comparing to a national competitiveness. I think it was in 1990s, maybe 30 years ago, the soft power. But it should be replaced. I think it's very meaningful. We could talk about the sweet power with the concept of Hallyu, because soft power it's a little bit the aspect of providers, aspect of celebrities, aspect of star powers. It's very constrained. Soft power is very constrained. So I think it needs to be transformed to a new concept of sweet power. So the topic of today's conference is Hallyu 5.0. It's very similar to the Web 3.0, as Professor Wang explained, and also it's very similar to Capitalism 4.0, the first wave of capitalism and the third wave of web internet economy. So I was thinking about why we are worried about the differentiation of the historic age. I found the one reason. The basic reason is we need alternative. The global alternative and aesthetic capitalism is very important to us. To me, I think there are only three powers can face for Hollywood in the world. The first one is Bollywood, I think so. Indian movie industry, Bollywood, we call it. The first one is. And the second, maybe alternative over there, another power is telenovela. From Brazil, TV Globo, and Mexico, is daily drama system, telenovela. And third alternative would be the Hallyu, Korean wave dramas and K-pops and K-cinemas. I think that means a lot. Hollywood dominated almost 110 years since 1912. The Universal Studio was founded in 1912. That Hollywood means the very unique Western cultural power. It's not changed. Something like a superhero, the universe of a superhero, Marvel animation like that. It's still going away, still going. Only the telenovela and Bollywood could face for the Hollywood cultural power. Recently, the Korean wave, K-drama and K-cinema, K-movie could represent the so-called Asian value. Asian value. It's very fresh experience and very new things. I think that is sweet power. It's quite different from the soft power. Soft power is like national competitiveness. It's very similar, to my opinion. So in terms of when it comes to cultural or fundamental change, and when it comes to soft power change, we need new terminology, sweet power.
Yeah.
So the reason we are seeking for Hallyu fifth wave, the fifth generation of Hallyu, or the fourth wave of capitalism, or third wave of web or internet mobile, is keyword is alternative. So all the citizens, need some approach of a new alternative, which would be sweet power, not soft power.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, first of all, thank you to all the speakers for giving a nice presentation on Hallyu. Like I said, I've been living for 27 years in Korea now. And in Korea, there is a saying, every 10 years, a river, a mountain, an ocean changes. 10년 지나가면 강산해가 변하다. So I have seen that change twice. So, and I come from a generation where we're more on analog, and I have seen that phase changing into digital. And why I try to put this in perspective is when I came in 90s, the terminology Hallyu or K-pop was not that existent. We used to use the term called Gayo to represent Korean music. And how it changed from Gayo to K-pop was a very beautiful transformation. I think probably during 2002 World Cup, when Korea opened for the foreigners, for the whole world, the global citizens coming to Korea, and it's a very interesting. The whole terms and the culture was changing in a very global way. For example, in end of 90s, there were not many restaurants who would have English menus, or they would be literally scared of foreigners, or will be more scared to introduce K food or K culture to foreigners because they were lost in translation. But that's all a beautiful transformation, and now we are all sitting here and trying to discuss what's the impact of Hallyu or K-pop or K-food. In terms of India, because I come from New Delhi, it's not only Indians trying to understand what Hallyu or Korean culture is. Like every time I go back to India and try to explain what Korea is, they're like, "Lucky, you're lying. We are scared of North Korea or the nuclear bombs." And in that perspective, Hallyu, K-dramas have helped a lot for that cultural exchange. My friend's daughter, probably 6 years last year, she asked me, she's never been to Korea, but she requested her father if Lucky Uncle can get a Blackpink signed CD for her. And I sent that autograph CD, DVD to her, and she keeps on talking to her friends about Korean music. She's watching it on YouTube or other platforms. My friends in India, now they can cook better ramen than me because they have seen in K-movies how to make different variants of Korean noodles or how to make kimchi. And it excites me so much how Hallyu has impacted in different way.
I keep thinking about a K-drama that's set in India, done in Bollywood. you know, like in the middle of a Squid Game episode, breaking out in a dance or something, you know.
If Squid Game was made in India, yeah, it would have 30 more episodes.
Yeah, I think, yeah, at night, you know, instead of turning the lights out, they'd be dancing. Yeah, no. Hey, so I think with Professor Wang, we had a very interesting analysis of being inside of Japan, and a unique perspective that not many people would be able to give. And I'm wondering what your experience, or do you have any thoughts on his presentation, or what thoughts you have about that? You know, I was thinking to say a little bit further, you know, just this role of like public diplomacy in a way that Koreans popular culture has brought to Japan. And you know how that is good, which is not going to be necessary in India or Brazil or France. But you know, what do you have a vantage point, or do you have any thoughts on that?
So I think actually I would put it in relation with the second one, second presentation, which is this really interesting, because both were raising the question of like how we use pop culture, and specifically Korean pop culture, as a political tool. And very often, I mean, especially with all of the Trump events that happened, like, was it 2 years ago, when you had BTS fans coming and, you know, mobilizing on TikTok to stop the attendance of his Tulsa meeting. All this was always told as like, oh yeah, K-pop fans, K-pop is so engaged because it allows K-pop fans to use it as a tool, but really, it probably is the other way around, of pop culture being this support or this flat thing, kind of, that you can kind of draw whatever political belief you fits your own, kind of. I mean, that's what was interesting. And so the second presentation raised that, and I feel like the the Japan presentation also was going in that way of showing that Japan used Korea as this way of reinforcing nationalism, or being like, okay, we need our own culture now, like, to be something that's popular in the country. And it's also something that's been happening in China, and also something that's been happening actually in a lot of countries where people see Korean culture blowing up and they're like, why is my country not doing that? Like, what's their recipe? How do they do this? And I think that's a lot of why we're super interested in Korean culture in general, as researchers, as writers, as people who work in it's how, why, and always this question that comes back. And that's really weird, because we just keep going back to it. It's been 30 years and 30 years that people just come back to why, how, and it's not moving away from that, because I think there's something that we've not understood yet or like put in words exactly of why that is. And because it touches so many things, maybe it's impossible to really grasp. I don't know, maybe we'll see, maybe someone figures out how to do it. But yeah, so I thought this was an interesting correlations of presentation.
Yeah, very cool, very interesting. Yeah. Anybody else have?
We benefit from the distance. We're seeing Korea from very far, from Brazil, from Latin America, even from Europe. But as Professor really stressed many times, Korea and Japan, they have many things in common. So they see everything in the detail. And when you go to the detail, you can be very critical. And that's the impression I have, that maybe the Japanese audience, since they can grasp all the subtle messages and go into the details, since Korea and Japan, they have a long history with ups and downs, and they have many similarities. I have the impression that they are more critical. And sometimes Koreans are more critical about Korean culture than foreigners tend to be. So maybe that's one reason why it's more complicated.
Yeah, and I think the first speakers, the first theme talking of cultural proximity, and what is attractive. But in Japan it offered, there's that little wedge. Any other comments on that, on his presentation? Any thoughts? You can go.
Yes. Yeah, Professor Huang analyzed the cultural proximity between Korea and Japan, even also China. I think it's fundamentally different. The proximity is available, but there exists big gap between Korea and Japan. There exists big gap. But the Hallyu program, K-pop, or Huino Sonata and 대장금 played a key role as a bridge between two different cultures. The proximity is not sufficient. The bridge is necessary. So I understand NHK producers made some supplemental program to explain 대장금 about the Korean Joseon dynasty history, the cultural background, that would be very helpful to Japanese viewers and to exotic viewers. So that's very important. I think it's kind of a strategy of NHK, not Korean broadcasting companies, because NHK were eager to capture the Japanese viewers with the very exotic Korean dramas at first time. So they made endeavors to make some supplemental, additional programs to let Japanese viewers understand, know the Korean history and Korean uniqueness. That was very kingpin, I think so.
Any thoughts?
I was just trying, like Professor Huang's presentation, when he said, like, Japan, there are only a monopoly of 5 channels. I was just trying to understand that, because in India we have 300 channels for media. And I was thinking, like, how different India is for K content consumers. Why I'm saying this is, 대장금, the very famous Korean drama, was broadcasted in India on a national television. It's called Doordarshan, on Sunday prime time morning 9 a.m. slot, which is usually blocked for Indian mythological dramas. And I keep going to India and ask my friends, well, it was shown on national TV. Have you seen this drama? They say, no, we missed it. We never saw it. Whereas Descendants of Sun, which was televised on a more popular channel, on a set-up box, everybody knows that, and most of the fans of K content in India, they do ask me, like, if I have met any of the actors from that show, stuff like that. So I was just trying to, compare, like, the cultural differences in that perspective.
As I was listening to the second speaker, Professor Song, talking about new platforms and Gen Z, and how the new platforms are really designed increasingly for this sort of circular participation. And I'm thinking about the ages of us up here, and what that means, and like how you all engage with these platforms, or do you, and how do you, and what you have to learn, and because it's very different, right, for this Gen Z versus other folks. And I'm wondering how, and then maybe it's not, I don't know. So I'm curious about that.
It's a very unique position to be at. You should learn a Korean word called ajashi. The short version is Ajay. I'm a typical example of that. So it means if you're not from this generation, there will be a gap. And of course, the more we try to catch up with this generation, you will hear the word Ajay. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a fair point. No, I mean even I feel I'm not following TikTok. I feel like I'm completely behind on TikTok, because like if you're over 20, you're basically old on this platform. So it's like they evolve so much. Actually, Korea is very interesting in that aspect, because there's so many platforms that are being developed here as an alternative to Netflix, which is talking of K-drama specifically, has been changing a lot of things in the last few years, 5. They basically have all dramas nearly on their catalog, which is really big, because they're one of the only legal way anyone has of watching it in most countries. There's other options, but their catalog does not compare at all. So I actually thought this was really interesting what you said about the different channels. Because, for example, in France, I feel like Korean dramas are starting to become more popular, especially since Squid Game, but also from Netflix in general. And often people were like, but why didn't it work? And if you look at Eastern Europe, because, for example, in Hungary, they started broadcasting Korean dramas on national television in 2000, I don't have the date exactly, but it's like 2007 or 8. And really the role of television as an early adopter of Korean dramas was really, really big. And for example, in Europe and in the US, because they weren't broadcasted, there was just a lag, like we're just way behind on it. And if you look at one of the most successful shows nowadays in the US, at least in the old way of how you do television with like longer seasons, a lot of episodes, it's the name evades me, of course, right now. Good Doctor, the adaptation of the Korean show. So that one, for example, worked really well because it worked quite well for the American public, but also because it was an adaptation of a Korean drama. And the beginning is really similar, and a lot of it draws from there. So yeah, I mean, I feel like platforms are just taking over that role that TV did not handle well. At least I'm talking for Europe and the US, which was to just, go into Korean content to be like, okay, we'll offer a platform so that people can watch it. And since the OTTs are offering that, people are just tuning in and realizing they like it, which is kind of what happened anywhere else in the world where TV just broadcasted Korean content. So,
yeah, many changes going on. I mentioned I work with YouTube. YouTube has changed it completely. Now everything is about short form. They're fighting TikTok. When we do longer videos, we're necessarily talking to an older audience. We're talking to people our ajushi age, like you mentioned. But I think it also depends on the audience, on the profile. Like in the case of Brazil, TV is a legacy channel. So when you have Korean dramas in Brazilian TV, you're necessarily talking to maybe a more conservative profile of viewers, and which is interesting because they're looking to see things they can't see in Brazilian content. So Korean content for Brazilians, they tend to be more conservative. They don't kiss, right? They just hold hands and that's it. When Brazilian telenovela tends to be very, they show more. But then on TV, they will actually, when they're talking to a more conservative, maybe Christian audience, they will favor Korean dramas. On OTTs, on the other hand, they're free. They can show anything. They just can add another option in their menu. I recently did a research on OTT for a Brazilian company, and that was basically what they were looking for. Hey, we want to add another line in our menu of content, and maybe a few people will just pick on that, and if they like, they can go on. It's easier for them to try new things, it's easier for them to add new content, and the cost, of course, is lower. But OTTs probably will be talking to more an urban, big city, more open to the world audience, not necessarily the holding hand drama. They'll be looking maybe for thrillers, maybe for Squid Game, which was huge in Brazil. They had to use another name for political reasons. But still, when in different platforms, you can talk to very different worlds, even though you are in the same country.
You're right. I think all Koreans are early adopters or innovators of new technology. As Dr. Song said, it's all that new platform economy. Yes, I think the entertainment industry workers in Korea, including seller or managers, are very skillful to deal with, Instagram and Facebook, SNS, and also YouTube and Netflix, like that. And there are also local players in OTT industry and SNS field, Naver, Kakao, like that. So Koreans doing well. So I think that's why the world citizens look at Koreans some trendy movement and they're seeking some next level out of Korean leverages. It's a very big strength in Korean in the entertainment industry. I think so.
Well, at least I'm happy to know I'm not the only one that has a difficult time keeping up. There's so many new platforms, as you say. I mean, I don't have time in my day. Hey, so I think yeah. Okay, so thank you. Thanks for the conversation. As the speakers were speaking, I was quite curious to see what it is that you all would say. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.